Good morning, my sweet friends. So I'm at home sick right now. I don't have COVID or the flu or strep. I just have a really bad viral infection that I've been running fever with. So I have to be fever-free for 48 hours before I can come back to work. So fingers crossed that I don't run any more fever and I can come back and be in class with you on Thursday, because that is where I would much rather be. But for every day, I'm going to make videos for all the assignments that I expect for you to do. Our guest teacher is going to show these to you. I expect for you to be on your best behavior for our guest teacher. If I have any reports of bad behavior, best believe it's going to be handled, boys and girls. I know how amazing you are. Show our guest teacher how amazing you are as well. So for science this week, we're going to be talking about early presidents and social reform. So our lesson goals is going to be to describe George Washington's service to the 13 colonies, to articulate why George Washington became the first president, and to summarize the first inauguration day in the United States. So we are going to watch this video that is going to explain what a timeline is in 60 seconds. So it's going to tell it to us very quickly, boys and girls.
Have you ever heard of a timeline? It's a line on which you can mark the beginning and end of a period of time, then mark off important dates and events along the way. The easiest way to imagine a timeline is to make one about your own life. So you would start your line with the date you were born, and then finish it with today's date. You might want to add a halfway point, so if you are 10 years old, the halfway point will be your 5th birthday. You could then fill in the rest of the line with events that have happened in your life. If you were making a historical timeline, it might begin at a time in history such as 1066, the year of the Norman invasion, and go up to the present day. Along this line, you might add events such as the year Henry VIII came to the throne, which was 1509, or the Great Fire of London, which was 1666. Timelines are a really great way of helping you understand what happened and when.
Alright, so that gives us some information about what a timeline is. Let's see. So this is a timeline showing, let me see if I can get this video to play.
Good morning. Today we're going to be learning more about George Washington. But before we begin, I would like to take this time to remind you that the United States began as 13 English colonies. These colonies broke away from Great Britain during the American Revolution. One of the heroes of the Revolution was the commander of the Continental Army, George Washington. We're going to read more about him in just a second. Before we begin, though, we have 3 events that we need to put on our timeline. Remember that a timeline goes in chronological order from when the events happened. So let's look at these events. On July 4th, 1776, the 13 British colonies declared their independence from Great Britain. George Washington was the commander of the Continental Army during the American Revolution from 1775 to 1781. In 1781, the Revolutionary War ended with the surrender of the British at Yorktown, Virginia. Let's put these in order on our timeline. First would be that George Washington was the commander of the Continental Army. It began in 1775, even though it didn't end until 1781. So really it would span this whole timeline, but because it began first, we put it first. The 13 British colonies declared their independence in 1776, so it goes next. And last is, in 1781, the Revolutionary War ended with the surrender of the British at the Yorktown in Virginia.
All right, boys and girls, so here, let's see, is a copy of the timeline that she explained in the video. Let's see. We're going to click on this picture and follow the link to learn some more about George Washington's life.
Good afternoon, boys and girls. My name is George Washington, the first President of the United States. And in today's video, I'd like to give you a little bit of information about me to help you learn more about me and my life. So stay tuned and enjoy. Hello and welcome back. It's me, George, again, and I'm going to give you some very basic information about me when I was very young. I was born on February 22nd in the year 1732, a very long time ago. I was born in the state of Virginia, located here in the United States. My father died when I was only 11 years old, and because of this I had a very basic education. My mother could not afford to send me to college, so I left school when I was only 15 years old. When I turned 16, I went to work as a surveyor. That is where I took...
So, first question, at what age did George Washington go to work as a surveyor? Raise your hand. That's correct, 16.
Measurements of new lands, and I mapped them out in detail so that everyone could see where there were hills and valleys and things like that on maps. When I was in my 20s, I met the beautiful Martha Washington, but at that time she went by the name Martha Dandridge Custis. I married her when I was 26. She was a widow who already had 2 children of her own. Their names were Jackie and Patsy. I, unfortunately, never had any children of my own. Another thing about me that is slightly embarrassing is that you may have heard that I had very bad teeth. I wore false teeth, made of ivory, set in silver.
So this question says, what were George Washington's teeth made of? Raise your hand. Tell me, boys and girls. Ivory or wood? Ivory, that's correct.
Some people think that the ivory may have been from either, are you ready for this one? Either a walrus or a hippopotamus. Can you believe that? Yes, this is me again, George Washington. I know I may appear a little bit different looking in this picture than what you're used to. Many people are used to seeing me on the picture of the dollar bill. This was me when I was...
On what bill is George Washington on? The $5 bill or the $1 bill? 1, 2, 3. Answer. $1 bill is correct. Good listening ears, boys and girls.
when I was a bit younger than when that picture was drawn of me. I became the first president of America. I was voted in 1789 and served as president for 8 years until 1797. And I served for a total of...
How many years did George Washington serve as president? 8 years or 2 years? Think about it. When I get to 3, I want you to tell your answer. 1, 2, 3. 8 years is correct. Good job, guys.
Of 2 terms. 2 terms is a total of 8 years. Each term is 4 years long. During these 2 terms, the times were very peaceful. And during this time, I established many roles and traditions as the President of the United States. Many of those roles and traditions still stand today. After 8 years of being president, I decided to step down because I believe that a president should not rule for a very long time. At 6 foot 2 inches tall and about 200 pounds, I was one of the biggest presidents of the United States ever. I played a key role in the American Revolution. You may have heard of this as the Revolutionary War, during which the American colonists won our independence from British rule. I'm sure you've heard of the United States of America Constitution. Did you know that I was one of the founding fathers of the United States Constitution? Do you know what the Constitution is? The U.S. Constitution is described as a document that consists of a collection of rules, and we still use a lot of these rules today to govern.
What is the Constitution of America? It helped us win the Revolutionary War, or is it a set of rules that we still use today? When I count to 3, I want you to whisper the answer. 1, 2, 3. That's correct, boys and girls. A set of rules that we still use today.
To govern the United States of America. Here are some fun facts about me that you may not be aware of. I bred hound dogs, and I treated those hound dogs like they were members of my family. I gave them some unusual names, some people said. One was named Tartar, another True Love, and another one was called Sweet Lips. Some of my favorite dishes, things to eat, were cream of peanut soup, mashed sweet potatoes with coconut, and string beans with mushrooms. Have you ever heard of Washington, D.C.? That's right, where the president lives, where the White House is. Washington, D.C. is the capital city of the United States of America, and it was named after me, George Washington. But the funny thing is,
how is Washington, D.C. named after? And I think that means who, not how. George Washington or George Washington Carver? When I count to 3, I want you to stand up. If you think the answer is George Washington, I want you to stay sitting down if you think the answer is George Washington Carver. 1, 2, 3. Stand up if you think it's George Washington. Sit down if you think it's George Washington Carver. George Washington is correct, boys and girls.
is that I never lived there. Something else that's very interesting is I was the only founding father of the United States of America who freed my slaves. I had personal control of over 120 slaves, and my wife Martha had control of many more. When I died, she set them all free a year later. And this, my young friends, is probably the face you recognize most about George Washington. You've seen this face before on every single dollar bill you've ever seen. Every single dollar bill ever printed had me on it. You can even see my name at the bottom under my tie. But I'm not only on the dollar bill. Do you know what coin I am also on? That's right. I am also on the quarter, which is 25 cents. The last fact that I'd like to tell you about, when I left being president a couple years afterwards, I caught a very bad cold. The bad cold turned into a throat infection, and I died on the 14th of December in 1799. I lived to the age of 67 years old, and I was so proud to be the first United States of America president, as well as one of the founding fathers. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you had fun learning about me. I had a lot of fun telling you about myself. This is George Washington signing off. Take care, boys and girls, and never stop learning.
That sure was super interesting. So,
Hello.
I am going to pause this video, and I'm going to create part 2, and you will begin part 2 in just a minute. Y'all can stand up, stretch, get a little bit of your wiggles out, and then be ready for part 2, boys and girls. See you in a second.